Morning, everyone. Elsie Jensen here. Today, we are going to make some Denver omelets using up the rest of our ham from our Easter dinner and some lime scones. So we are going to start out by prepping our lime scones so we can get those in the oven. So we're going to use 2 cups of all-purpose flour. So 1 and 2. And then we're going to add in a half a teaspoon of salt. There we go. And 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And then we're going to give this a little stir. So we've got 1, 2, and then I forgot our half a cup of sugar. And then we're going to mix all this up, and then we're going to cut in a half a cup of butter. So we need a half a cup of granulated sugar. And then we're going to give this a nice stir, mix it up. And then we're going to cut 2 sticks of cold butter into it to kind of make the base for our scones. The scones are kind of like a mix between, I guess, a cookie and a biscuit. They're a little bit firmer than a biscuit, and a little sweeter. I cut them into little triangles, but they're absolutely delicious. Okay, so we're going to need a half a cup of butter, which is 1 whole stick. But apparently I bought quarter sticks when I was at the store. And I always think these look so cute. Okay. So we're going to just cut. I always like to cut mine into like fourths this way and then slice it up into cubes. It just makes it a little bit easier to cut it into my dough. Because when we do that, I'm going to use my pastry cutter and we're going to try to cut this butter up into sizes like no bigger than a pea. And this is going to be for our nice flaky layers in our scone. And you got to use cold butter here. You can't have room temperature because that cold butter is what's going to give you the nice soft flaky layers in your scone. So I'm going to use my pastry cutter here, which is like a bunch of knives, and we are going to cut our butter into our flour, sugar, salt, and baking soda or baking powder mixture. And this is going to be the dry base for our scones. And then we're going to use a little bit of sourdough discard, cream, and lime juice and lime zest for the remainder. Okay, give it a little cut. You could always use a food processor for this, but I find a pastry cutter works great and it's a lot less mess. So I'm just going to take out any of the butter that gets stuck. And then we're going to keep cutting it all the way through. Here we go. And again, you want to make sure your little cubes of butter that you cut in there, you cut them up smaller than a pea. That's just going to prevent any big butter pockets from forming in your scone. If you don't have a pastry cutter or a food processor, you can do this with 2 butter knives. It's a bit more tedious, but it does work well. I would just chop up my butter really smaller first, and then you can cut it into your flour. Okay. Let's get any of these last chunks out of here. Perfect. And now we are ready to make our wet base for our scones. Set this right here. We're going to use a half a cup of sourdough discard. And it can be active or ready to throw out. Either one is fine. I fed mine early this morning, so it's a little bit active, but not fully active. There we go. So we got a half a cup of our discard. And now we're going to use some fresh, there it is, lime juice and zest. So we want to do our zest first, because once you zest them, it's really hard to juice them afterwards, or well, it's hard to zest after you juice. So zest first, then juice. And we're going to use the zest of about 1 lime, but we're going to probably use the juice of 2 because we need about a good tablespoon. So I'm going to just see how juicy my lime is. Sometimes you get a really juicy one. Sometimes you get a drier one. It smells so fresh. I love the smell of lime. But here we're going to get all of our zest in there. It has a nice bright green, which will add a nice little pop of color to our scones. There we go. And we're going to cut these in half, and we're aiming for about a tablespoon. So depending on how juicy this one is, I'll see if we need to cut open another one. So that's about a half a teaspoon. So I definitely think I'll need another one. And you want to use fresh lime juice, not that like processed true lime. Just, you can't beat fresh lime juice. I think anytime you get the ones that already have been pasteurized, they have a very chemically taste to it. It's the fresh lime juice that's going to make a big difference. Same within our glaze that we'll be making for these. Okay. This one is a bit more juicy. Good. So we're aiming for about a tablespoon. It's fine if you go a little over. You don't want to go under on it. And so we have that in there. And now we're going to add about 1/4 cup of cream, or not 1/4 cup, 2 tablespoons of cream. So 1 and 2, and then 1 egg. And then we're going to mix all of this up. So I'm going to poke my yolk, and we're going to make all of this deliciousness up, and then we're going to add it to our dry ingredients. It's going to give us a dry shag, and then we're going to do our press and folds until we have some really nice flaky layers in our scones. Okay, so we've got our wet ingredients mixed up. We're going to make a little bit of room here. We're going to need this counter in just a second. So here we've got our dry, and I'm just going to pour all of our wet ingredients in here. There we go. And then we're going to give it a light mix. You don't want to over mix this. So you want this to turn into a nice dry shag. And then what we're going to do is we're going to press it together. So don't try to cream this whole mixture into a dough. Instead, we're going to press it and fold it into a shape just like you would with a biscuit. Okay. So here we have our nice dry shag. And we're going to flip this out on our counter. And I said it may look dry now, but it will hold its form. So we're going to just press and kind of fold the mixture on top of each other. So press and fold. Every one of these folds in here creates a new flaky layer in your scone. So people always like when my scones and my biscuits bake up, they have these just mountains of layers. And that is from these presses and the folds. And you don't want to knead your dough. So that is the big thing, is it's more of folding and pressing versus a knead. A knead will give you like a scone that's kind of got a rock texture to it. It'll be really stiff. And this is why you also need your butter to be cold, because you don't want it to turn into a paste.
Yeah, question. Can you press and fold too many times?
Yes, you can essentially press and fold too many times to where you've now got you've kneaded it. So I've just did it until you see how it's not completely in its shape and form. It's kind of crumbling still. This is where I'm going to press it into its puck shape and cut it. And just kind of pushing in the sides, because you don't have to worry about it if it crumbles a little bit in your transfer process, because when that butter melts in the oven, it will come all together and it won't be crumbly when you bake it up. So now we're kind of pushing it into our little puck shapes. And this is going to give us the like traditional look of a scone that is kind of like a ray, you know. We'll cut it each one into eighths. Although one of my pucks is slightly bigger than the other, but that's okay. Okay, now I've got a baking sheet lined with parchment paper. And then I'm just going to take my pastry cutter and slide underneath it. You could use a spatula if you don't have a pastry cutter at home. And we're just going to place each puck on our parchment paper. And then I'm going to use my pastry cutter, and we're going to just work by cutting in half. And then we're going to cut in half the opposite way. So now we've made fourths. And if you pull them out a little bit, and now we're going to cut them into eighths, because I like to do little mini scones versus great big ones. They cook up faster and they're less likely to get dry when you have small ones. And, you know, they're like cute little treats. So we're going to cut it in half. If you don't have a pastry cutter, you could use a like butter knife on this. You know, just you want something that's kind of long and flat to cut through it.
Yeah, question. What is a scone?
A scone is like a mixture, I want to say, between a biscuit and a cookie. So it's got a mild sweetness, but it has the delicious kind of flaky layers like a biscuit. And you can do savory scones too, but I typically do mine sweet. But they just have a nice little sweetness, a little crunch to the outside of it, but like a flaky biscuit center, I want to say. Okay. So we've got our scones right here. Let me get my hands a little warm. Now I'm going to be making a lime glaze, so I'm not going to brush them, but if you didn't want to do a lime glaze, you could brush them and then do a little bit of sugar on it for a final touch. But I find that since we're going to do a glaze over it, it gets a little overkill with it. So we're going to leave them just like this, and we're going to pop them in our preheated oven at 400 degrees for 18 minutes. There we go. And then I'm going to set my timer for 18 minutes. Okay, and now while those are baking up, we will make our omelets and prep our lime glaze for the scones. Let's give my counter just a little bit of a wipe so I don't have crumbs everywhere. Okay. So we are going to do a Denver omelet. So I'm going to start by cutting up. We're going to just use a little bit of an onion, a sweet onion. So I'm going to cut off and use half of it. We're going to give a small dice to it. And we're going to start caramelizing that up, because I like to cook the insides of my omelets, like all the veggies and stuff, first before I put them in. It is a bit more work, but it is so much more tasty. Just makes a big difference, because I find if you don't cook them up, then you're eating your omelet and you have just like this crunch, and you know, peppers can be bitter and onions can be really astringent if you don't cook them up. So we're going to put a little bit of butter in here, about a teaspoon, and then we're going to put our onions in there. And again, I'm doing a finer dice on them, not quite a mince, but a small dice, just because I like my omelet middles to be smaller cut. Let's take our spatula here, get it going. And we're just going to do a quick caramelize or quick like skillet or saute of our veggies because it will be delicious. I know a lot of times you go to restaurants or you go to those buffets and they have an omelet station, but everything is like fresh. Like all the vegetables aren't like cooked or sauteed, and they're just not quite as good if you take the extra few minutes to saute them up. So while our onions are going, I'm going to chop up some peppers because for a Denver omelet, it is just onions, peppers, and ham. I'm going to throw in a little bit of parsley too, but it's a fairly simple one. And this is great. We still have some leftover ham from our Easter dinner, so I want to try to use it up. And I thought omelets would be great for breakfast today, especially since, we have a pretty busy day today. We've got appointments. I'm taking my stepdad to the airport. And then we have a late night game tonight. My daughter has one of her state games, and it's going to be late. It's like an hour away, and we have to be there at 6:45. Game starts at 7. So we probably won't get home until after 10 o'clock tonight. So it's kind of a late night, especially on a school night. But pretty busy today. Okay. I'm going to do these again. I'm doing nice small dice on these as well because I want not to be like a huge chunk of pepper in there. I like them to kind of be small and blend well. Okay. And you want to just kind of cook these on high heat. We're not caramelizing them. We're just doing a really fast saute to let out some of that astringent flavor in the onions, as well as get rid of a little bit of the bitterness in the peppers. There we go. You can hear them popping. And while those are sauteing, I'm going to cube up my ham over here because we'll give it a quick toss in there. I'm just going to take off the outside skin of the ham. That just will end up being really chewy in your omelet, so you don't need that. And then if you have any fat, you just want to kind of cut that away as well. Okay. And then we're going to cube these up as well. Nice little small bits. And then we'll give them a quick saute as well in our pan. Let me stir this. And we'll get these cubed up nicely. It's just a great way to reuse some of your ham, so we're not just having ham sandwiches every day, but you can just, you got omelets, you've got just all sorts of delicious things you can make with them. I say, we don't eat ham a lot, like a ham, spiral ham. We typically do it like Christmas, Easter, but it is one of those leftovers that are very versatile that you can use in a lot of different recipes. You can use it in soup. Makes a great ham, and like a bean soup is also like really delicious. We used it in a Cobb salad yesterday. Okay. Before we throw the ham in, I want to put in a little bit of garlic, just about a half a teaspoon. You don't need much. And we're going to let it saute up real quick. And then we'll put our ham in. We'll give it a little bit of a thing, and then we'll prep our eggies for our omelet bowl. There we go. But you see how we're just getting this nice little kind of sauteed char on them. Be delicious. And then I'm going to mince up my parsley as well. Do a nice fine. Now you could either put your parsley, if you don't mind it as much, you could throw it in your egg for really pretty looking. I tend to like mine kind of cooked up in my seasoning, so it's not so like in your face parsley. So put a little bit, about a teaspoon in there. And then we're going to move this out of the way.
You have a question? What color are your walls?
They are, it's like a green, like a light greenish blue. I think it was called Morning Zen from Bear. Painted a couple of years ago, but I absolutely love it because depending in what light you have, sometimes they look blue, sometimes they look green, sometimes they look gray. So they change throughout the day. But it is definitely, it was a color I picked out because, you know, when we first bought our house, it was like beige, and I was in like wanting pops of color. My husband, of course, is rolling his eyes because I've had him paint our house like 3 times, like the different colors in it. Then I decided I wanted to do bright colors everywhere. I don't know why, but I had like it's so bad. It's the only way. I had like a neon green kitchen, almost the color of this lid. I had a bright orange office, a bright yellow living room. It was like a bag of Skittles. And it was one of those things that I liked it for about 6 months. And then I was like, what have I done? And then I finally decided, okay, green's my favorite color. So I found this really nice muted green that is calming, hence Morning Zen. And I absolutely love it. And I will not paint again. Okay, so we've sauteed up our vegetables and for our omelets, and I'm just going to take out all the little scraps here. And this is again for our Denver omelet. And doesn't that look delicious? Now, a trick that I like to do is now that this is sauteed, we're going to put a little bit of cheese in it, and it's going to start melting it so that it doesn't have to do as much work in your omelet. So we're just going to put a little bit over it. And it's just going to start that melting process. Okay, now let's get our eggs ready for our skillet. Put a little bit of eggs in. You're going to want to use a non-stick pan again for this. This is, I'm using HexCloud. I love it. It works great. I'm going to turn my skillet off, and we're going to let the butter melt, and then we'll add our eggs in. But with an omelet, you're going to want to pre-mix up your eggs. Normally, I just do a crazy scramble in the pan, but with an omelet, you want to start with a pre-mixed egg. There. We're going to do a 6-egg omelet. Works about well for this pan size. I don't do individual omelets. I always make really big omelets. I have one time I made this huge omelet. It fed like 10 people, but I was like, not doing little ones, just doing big ones. It never, you can't flip it out as easily, but tastes just as good. Okay. We've got that. Now I'm going to whip up my eggs. There we go. So just make sure they're whipped up nice. And then I'm going to turn my heat back onto my skillet to kind of a middle of the range of 5. And then we're going to pour our eggs in. And then we're going to let it sit on this low temperature and cook. You don't want to have your heat too high because then you'll burn the bottom of your eggs. So nice and kind of low and slow. And then what we'll do is after it starts to cook a little bit, I'll kind of pick up the sides and let some of that yolk run underneath, or the egg run under it. But now, while this is doing our low and slow cooking, let's make our glaze for our scones. Okay, we're going to use up the last bit of my powdered sugar here. So you don't need a whole lot of glaze for the scone. So we're going to start with like 3/4 of a cup. And we're going to do about a 1/2 tablespoon of cream. Some fresh zest. This not only makes the glaze look really pretty, but it also gives you just another layer of lime. And then we're going to put our lime juice in here. Okay. Let's check on our thing. Pop that little bubble. And so what I like to do is I just kind of go around and I put it that way. You don't have to wait for the insides. Now you can always put a lid on your thing and cook it slowly that way. But I find that this method works well and it tastes a little bit better because you get more of that kind of crisped up egg versus like a steamed egg. And just kind of go over and lift up. You can always pop, there we go. And then you just kind of want to cook it until all of this egg is gone because you don't want a snotty omelet. There we go. Going to coat down. We're going to let it sit, cook for a little bit. We've got our good about a half a teaspoon of zest in here. Shake off a little bit.
Yeah, question. When you have late nights with the little ones, what kind of items do you pack for snacks?
So I'm actually going solo tonight for the thing. So it'll just be my daughter and I. So they'll be home with that. But when we do our little games and stuff like that, a lot of times, we made our granola bars the other day. So I'll pack granola bars. I make like homemade Chex Mix. And then we have just like all sorts of little snacks, whatever baked good I have. Sometimes we do a picnic if it's like we're going to be there all day. But when it's too late like this, then I'm like, okay, you guys got to stay home. So we are actually getting fast food tonight, and my daughter is going to be very happy because she wants Chipotle, and I said we could have Chipotle. So I said we do eat out or get fast food occasionally, not often. Okay, now we are going to put our cheese on. And now you want to do the nice layer of ham just on one side. So this is going to be a nice and delicious Denver omelet. It has our ham, peppers, onions, cheese mixed into it. And then we put our cheddar cheese right here. And now we're going to slide under it. Hopefully, there we go. You just want to get your whole spatula underneath. And then, let's see, flip it over. Perfect. See, when you make them big, they're not as easy to flip, but I don't like to make multiple omelets. And now, before we flip it out onto our thing, we're going to let it sit on the skillet, heat off. This is going to allow that cheese the extra time it needs to melt. So it's really important. Turn it off, but keep it on the skillet because that's going to be what keeps it nice and like warm to where it melts it. Okay, now we're going to mix up our glaze here. We've got our fresh lime. We've got some cream. And we've powdered sugar. And now for a really tart one, you could do just straight lime juice. But I find that that cream just mellows it out and just gives a slightly nicer texture to our glaze. There we go. And this is kind of the consistency you want. And we will drizzle this over our scones when they're ready.
What do you call that consistency?
I call it Elmer's glue consistency. My husband does not like that. He says it's kind of, he's like, oh, you're going to feel like, makes him thinks like he's eating glue. But I don't know how else you can describe this. It's a good, you know what I mean? I always say it's glue. It's got a nice little slow drizzle. There we go. And of course it's white. You know what I mean? Let's see. Let's grab my thing. Our scones have about 2 minutes. Perfect. So we're going to plate up our omelet here in just a second. Okay. So what I like to do, now you could always do little like omelets in a mini pan, but I just find that like that's just too much work. So we're just going to cut it out. And we're going to have it here. And so you've got a nice ham, cheese, pepper, Denver omelet. Of course, all the goop likes to fall out. Delicious. But you see all this stuff, you can see that cheese has already melted in there. That is the key to the omelet, is you let it sit. So we've got our Denver omelets here with ham, peppers, onions, and some fresh parsley and cheddar cheese. We sauteed up our veggies in the ham first to give it that extra flavor, and then put it in there with our cheese. But let's go grab our scones out of the oven. There we go. And then our breakfast will be complete. Beautiful. Look at those flaky layers. You can see one of them had so many layers it tipped over. But look at our beautiful scones here. This is our lime scone with fresh lemon or lime juice and zest in it. And while they're hot, you've got to glaze them because this is going to allow them to run down. I'm just going to pull this guy over, but look at the layers on that guy. How many? He just burst over. Okay. And that's where you get from the press and folds. Now let me grab a spoon for this, and we're going to drizzle our glaze over it. So this is our fresh lime glaze. And I love to do the drizzle now. And then if there's a little bit left over, you can do it again later. But I like it to melt and coat the whole scone, because it then like makes a little sugary, limey crust on it versus just like frosting on the top. But you see how when they're hot, it's just going to melt right over it. It's going to be delicious. So again, these are our fresh lime scones, which is, I will say, they have a brighter tartness to them than lemons. You know, lemons are a bit sweeter and stuff like that. I think lime really gives you that really like citrusy kick to it. And then of course the specks of green from the zest are always a pretty touch to it. There we go. Okay. So we have our delicious lime scones with our lime glaze. We used our sourdough discard in it, and we made up our omelets for breakfast, guys. So we are done here. Thank you guys for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, show you what I'm cooking for our family, and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, all of our streams we do upload to the link on our page, so you can always watch them again and recreate the recipes at home. Well, guys, thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe.